Hello class, today we'll begin with our first chapter of the second book, that is the Indian politics book. The chapter is Challenges of Nation Building. Now it's a very important chapter and it lays the foundation for the rest of the chapters in the textbook. The chapter deals with the early years, the politics of in the early years after independence. Well, most of you are aware of the history of independent India, that for 200 years the British ruled our country, and finally in 1947 we gained our independence. So, right after independence, what was the policy or what was the idea that the leaders were going to embark on for the process of nation building? There were too many opinions, but however, we can say that there were two goals everyone agreed upon. What were the two goals? Number one, that we shall run our country through democratic government. That is, there was no disagreement that, whether we should go for a dictatorship or should we go for a one party rule government. There was no such conflict in the minds of leaders. No matter which political party they belong to, they all agreed that the country has to be run through democratic means. The second goal was that of to run the government for the good of the people, especially the poor and the disadvantaged groups in the society. Now, 1947 was not any ordinary year. Not only were we getting independence, but we also had to set in motion a system of administration. Also, the year was experiencing the trauma of partition. At the same time, the nation was faced with multiple challenges, out of which three challenges were the most important. So, the question here for you is, what were the three challenges of nation building? Now, this is a very important question and it comes both as a 6 marks and a 4 marks question. The answer to this is that there are three challenges. What is the first challenge? The first immediate challenge was to shape a nation. We all are aware that India is a geographically vast country. Also, it has various ethnic compositions, religious composition. So, how to bring all these components together? Would it lead to the disintegration of the country, or would it act as a unifying force? So there were serious questions about the future of India. Would India survive as a unified country? Would it do so by emphasizing national unity at the cost of every other objective? Would it mean rejecting all regional and national identities? How was the integration of Indian territory to be achieved? This is the first challenge. The second challenge was to establish democracy. Now, India before this had never had any democratic rule. We were earlier ruled by the princes and the kings. Thereafter, the British took over, and till now we had not had any democratically elected government. So that was another challenge. But democracy, as in our case, does not only making a constitution. We also had to put in motion or put in practice a democratic way of life. So the challenge was to develop democratic practices in accordance with the constitution. The third challenge was to ensure development and well-being of society. Well, we all know that India was a poor country, and more than 70% of its population lived in the rural area. So it was very important to bring these people into the mainstream of economic activity. Also, Europe at this time was going through a process of industrialization. So how are we going to ensure development and well-being of the entire society? So now these three challenges were the top priorities for the leaders at this time. I'll do a quick recap of all the three challenges. First challenge is to shape a nation. Second challenge is to establish democracy, and the third challenge is to ensure development and well-being of the entire society, which involves effective policies for economic development and eradication of poverty. Next, we are going to look at the process of partition and what were the problems faced by the leaders. Now, there are four major problems which were faced by the leaders. Number one, no single belt of Muslim majority. That is, in India, we know that we cannot say that, in a particular place or a city, this area is a Muslim area or this area is a Hindu area. We have, Muslims and Hindus living intermingled with each other all over the country and even in our cities. Second is, not all Muslims wanted to go to Pakistan. There were many Muslim majority areas which wanted to be in Pakistan, whereas there were many Muslims areas which wanted to be in India. Remarkable in this case is the name of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who is also known as the Frontier Gandhi. He did not, or he was not in favor of partition, and he did not want to go to Pakistan after partition. However, Northwestern Frontier Province NWFP was later amalgamated with Pakistan. The third problem was that there was a large area of Muslim majority. Here we are talking about the regions of Punjab and Bengal, and we know that in both these places we had a mix of Hindu and Muslim population living. So there was a big question on how these two areas would be distributed between India and Pakistan. Eventually, it was decided that these two provinces would be bifurcated according to the religious majority at the district or even at the lower level. The fourth problem was that of minorities. Now, India does not only have Muslims and Hindus, we also have Jains, Christians, Parsis, and various other religions which stay in our country. So, at the time of partition, there was a question on the future of these minorities, that what would be their constitutional status. Would they go to Pakistan or would they go to India? In August 1947, after 200 years of rule in India, the British finally left. The Indian subcontinent, as we know, was partitioned into two independent nation states. Number one, the Hindu majority India, and number two, the Muslim majority Pakistan. Immediately after partition, there began one of the greatest migrations in human history, as millions of Muslims trekked to West and East Pakistan, that is today's Bangladesh, while millions of Hindus and Sikhs headed in the opposite direction, that is India, and many hundreds of thousands never made it. So, what were the consequences of partition? The consequences of partition can be distributed into 6 broad categories. Number one, there were killings and atrocities on both sides of the border. I am sure you have heard and seen movies on the horror stories of how people were killed, how people used to travel by train, and those trains were intercepted, and people traveling by those trains were massacred and killed. Not only that, those traveling by foot also were looted. They were killed on the basis of religion. The second consequence we can say is that cities like Lahore, Amritsar and Kolkata became divided into communal zones. Now, before partition, or before India was independent, or before this idea of partition cropped up, we know that Hindus and Muslims lived together in India. Suddenly, this idea of partition created the cities into different Hindus and Muslim zones, and each of the communities were fearful of venturing or going into these areas. Like a Muslim would be scared of going into a Hindu area, or a Hindu would be scared of coming to a Muslim area. The third consequence was that people were forced to abandon their homes and move across the border. Not always the people were wanting to go. They had their businesses, they had lived their lives, all their lives, and many generations in either of the countries. So not everybody wanted to go. However, they were forced due to circumstances to abandon their homes and move across the border, sometimes even leaving behind their homes and wealth and business. The fourth consequence of partition is division of assets. Now, the government machinery of the country was divided between Pakistan and India, so much so that all government offices like railways, postal department, the army, the police services, the officials of all these services were divided. The fourth consequence of partition is division of assets. That is, the government assets or the government departments were also divided between India and Pakistan. For example, the railways, the postal services, the army, the police service, even the police band was divided between India and Pakistan. The distribution of officials took place, and also to the extent that tables, chairs, furnitures, paper clips were also divided between India and Pakistan. The fifth consequence is division of hearts. Now, due to this trauma of Pakistan, you see a lot of poets, filmmakers came out to express their agony or angst in the form of poems, writings, movies. So here you see a portrayal of division of hearts. And the last consequence is that of the problem of minorities. That is, the Jews, Christians, Parsis, they were very confused about their future or their constitutional status. Were they welcome in Pakistan or would they be welcome in India? So these are the 6 consequences of partition. As we are discussing the consequences of partition, we also have to know what was the idea behind, or what was the basis on which this partition took place. To understand the basis, we have to know the administrative system which existed before 1947. Now, before 1947, the British India was divided into 2 major categories. First is the British Indian provinces, which were directly under the British government. For example, the Madras province, the Bombay province, and so on. And the second was the princely states, which were 565 in number, and they were ruled by the princes and enjoyed some amount of control over their internal affairs, but they had to pay taxes to the British. To understand better the distribution of British India and princely states, let us take a look at the map given here. All the areas marked in yellow show the British Indian provinces. Here you can see the United Province, the Bengal Province, Bihar, Sindh Province, Madras Province, Mumbai Province, and so on. And the blue area marked is all the princely states. For example, the princely states of Ajmer and Mewar, Rajputana, Junagadh, Hyderabad, and so many others. Now, coming back to our original question of what was the government's approach towards integration of these princely states and the process of partition. In this, the government's approach had 3 major components. First is that the people of most of the princely states clearly wanted to be part of the India. So here we are talking not of the princes but of the common people who lived in those areas. The government assumed and government believed that most of these people wanted to join the Indian Union. The second is that the government was prepared to be flexible in giving autonomy to some regions. We see that during the process of partition, not every princely state was very eager to come and join India. So to strike a balance, the government said, okay, that we will give you some concessions, and they would be given certain amount of autonomy or certain amount of independence to administer their own region. This came to be fruitful in the case of Kashmir and also in the case of Manipur, which we will study later. The third approach was that in the backdrop of partition, which brought into focus the contest over demarcation of territory, the integration and consolidation of the territorial boundaries of the nation had assumed supreme importance. So right now, during partition, after partition, the first and the most important focus of the government was to bring together all these princely states and consolidate the territorial boundary of India. To achieve the full integration of the princely states with the Indian Union, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had already started working before 1947. So he had already engaged in peaceful negotiations and brought almost all the princely states whose territories were contiguous to the Indian boundary into the Indian Union. They were all made to sign a document which was called the Instrument of Accession. So to define Instrument of Accession, it was a document which meant or which stated that all the states, those who have signed it, have agreed to join or be a part of Union of India. However, not all the princely states were so eager to join. There was some problem in the case of Junagadh, Hyderabad, Kashmir and Manipur. In this chapter, we will go into details of the cases of Hyderabad and Manipur, and Kashmir we will do it later in the textbook. So let us first take up the case of Junagadh. The Nawab of Junagadh showed more interest in joining Pakistan after partition. However, the government of India felt that the people of Junagadh did not share his view. So the solution was found through a plebiscite. Now plebiscite is a vote from the people in which the people of Junagadh voted to join the Indian Union, and Junagadh thereafter became a part of India. The next is the case of Hyderabad. Now Hyderabad was ruled by Nizam, who was also known as one of the richest men in the world. The Nizam of Hyderabad wanted an independent status for Hyderabad. However, the Indian government continued to negotiate with him and they were not willing to give him any independent status. So in the beginning, he entered into what was called the standstill agreement with India, which said that things would remain status quo while negotiations with the Indian government were going on. However, Nizam in Hyderabad was not a very popular ruler and he was despised by his people. So in the meantime, a movement of people of Hyderabad state against the Nizam's rule gathered force. The Nizam responded by unleashing his paramilitary force, who were known as the Razakars, on the people. Now in this fight between the Nizam and the people, various atrocities were committed. Many women were raped, there were people who were maimed, and finally the central government had to order the army to intervene, and after a few days the Nizam had to surrender and Hyderabad was finally acceded to the Indian Union. The next is the case of Manipur. Like the Nizam of Hyderabad, the king of Manipur was also not willing to join the Indian Union. The Maharaja Bodh Chandra Singh of Manipur, after a lot of negotiations with the Indian government, agreed to sign the Instrument of Accession on the condition that internal autonomy of the state would be maintained. So Manipur was to remain a constitutional monarchy. Now what is a constitutional monarchy? It is a system wherein the king remains the head of the state, whereas the actual administration of the state is carried out through a elected body. As we can say, the case of Britain, wherein the queen is the head of Britain, but it has an elected parliament. So that was the kind of system that was agreed upon in Manipur. In 1948, Manipur became the first state of to conduct elections on the basis of universal adult franchise, and a legislative assembly was elected. Now in the legislative assembly, as it would happen, there were different parties, and in this the Congress specially was persuading the Maharaja again and again to sign the merger agreement with India. In 1949, the Maharaja, under pressure from the Manipur Congress, had to sign the merger agreement without consulting the legislative assembly. That is, there was no debate or no vote taken in the legislative assembly. Maharaja simply, on pressure from the Manipur Congress, signed the merger agreement. And this is how Manipur became a part of India. However, this was not approved by the people of Manipur, and till today, repercussions or consequences of this decision are being felt in Manipur. Reorganization of states. Well, the process of nation building did not come to an end with partition and integration of princely states. Now the challenge was to draw internal boundaries of Indian states. So after the country had been divided into two parts, that is India and Pakistan, all the princely states made to sign the instrument of accession, the next challenge was to demarcate the boundaries of or creation of states. Now during the British time, these states existed as administrative unit. There was no principle or there was no basis for the formation of states during British time. But in independent India, the government wished to follow or create a new system by which the states would be created or demarcated. So the first idea was to demarcate the states on the basis of language. This idea was taken up from the Congress model, wherein the Congress across the nation had regional chapters based on the basis of language. So the idea was translated that why not have states on the basis of language. But not everybody was very confident of applying this theory or applying this principle for the creation of new states. Why? Because our leaders felt that carving out states on the basis of language might lead to disruption and disintegration, and already we had seen the partition of the nation, and they feared that it would divide the country further. So the idea was left out, or it was kept aside for a time being. However, the status quo could not be maintained for long. Why? Because there were states in the country which started demanding statehood. It started first with the state of Madras. Now Madras province was amalgamation of both the Tamil and Telugu speaking people. The Telugu speaking people started demanding a separate state for themselves, that is Andhra Pradesh. This led to the Vishal Andhra movement. Now in Vishal Andhra movement, it was joined by various parties, various walks of life, and it also led to a lot of violence. In this movement, Potri Shirmalu, a Congress leader and Gandhian activist, went on an indefinite fast for 56 days and he died thereafter. After this, the movement became all the more aggressive and the government was finally compelled to create the state of Andhra Pradesh on the basis of language. This happened in the year 1952. After the creation of state of Andhra Pradesh, the other states also started demanding a separate statehood. For example, the province of Mumbai had both Gujarati and Marathi speaking people. So they wanted a separate Maharashtra state and a separate Gujarat state. All these reasons led the government to set up a new state reorganization commission in 1953. The work of the commission was going to be to determine a basis of or principles on which the new states in the Indian Union could be created. After a lot of research, the State Reorganization Commission gave a principle that states in India should be created on the basis of language, or as it is said, that they forwarded the linguistic principle. After which, on the recommendations of the State Reorganization Commission, a State Reorganization Act was passed in the year 1956. According to the Act, 14 new states and 6 union territories were created on the basis of language. So the larger question which now arises is that did this experiment of creation of states on the basis of language prove successful in the long run? I think yes, we can answer in affirmative that yes, this experiment has proven to be successful. Why? Because it has been more than 70 years since the formation of states on the basis of language, and we have not seen any further division of the country on the basis of language. So we can say that the linguistic principle has worked well for the case in India. Also, the creation of states on the basis of language has opened the path for many people to venture into politics. It is now politics is not limited to a small group of English speaking people who can only conduct themselves, or who can who have good oratory skills and who can do public speaking. But even those who do not know English can express themselves, and they can stand for elections, they can talk to people, and they can garner vote for themselves. So the linguistic principle has also encouraged a lot of people from other languages to come and join the Indian political arena. The State Reorganization Act led to the creation of 14 states, but the creation of statehood did not stop there. In the later years also, there were various states which were created. For example, the state of Maharashtra and Gujarat were created in 1960 from Bombay province. Nagaland was formed in the year 1963. Punjab became a state in 1966. Meghalaya was carved out of Assam in 1972. Manipur and Tripura also became states in 1972. Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram became states in 1987. Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Uttaranchal were created in 2000, and the most recent state that we saw was created was Telangana. However, we have to remember that language did not continue to remain the only basis or theory for creation of states in the later years. The states were also created on the basis of regional culture or complaints of regional imbalance in development. For example, the creation of Uttarakhand or Uttaranchal from the larger state of Uttar Pradesh. The people of hilly areas in Uttar Pradesh complained that they did not get a fair share of development, and the major chunk of all the funds that were coming to the government were being spent in the plain areas, and the hilly people were being left out. And this constant complaint led to the creation of Uttarakhand in the year 2000. With that, we come to the end of the chapter. I have tried to summarize the chapter in under major headings and subpoints according to the questions that come in the board. But the best thing that I want you to do is to first read the chapter from your NCERT book. Remember, your NCERT book is your Bible. So before you again come back to this PPT, first read the chapter, then take a look at the PPT, and the third and the final stage would be to solve the questions. Thank you, class. Happy studying. Keep well. Bye.